What a blessing it has been so far. And the feast is not over yet. We enjoy the last day of the Feast of Sukkot, which is a special day. And Yahweh blesses us even with the 8th day, which in Hebrew is called Shemini Atzeret, the day of the Great Assembly. So it's another day where we can all fellowship together as a family, and it's really a huge blessing. And I want to talk about the meaning of Sukkot, of this feast. And I think for me it's now the 12th year that Yahweh blessed us with, that my family can be here for Sukkot in Jerusalem. And each feast we've learned so much. We all know that the feasts are about Yahweh's plan of salvation, and the first time you hear it, oh, that sounds neat, but I don't get it. The second time when it's explained to you, wow, yeah, with Pesach I can really see the symbolism and everything, how Yeshua fulfilled it perfectly. And then the other feast, year by year, when you come and you learn, and I was blessed to have wonderful teachers, and I'm still learning so much every feast, and Yahweh's showing us so much. So I know we have several people who are just started keeping the feasts, and I wanted to go over and bind all these different aspects that we have of Sukkot together, and just give a little overview, and also change a little bit the perspective, because as we learn more and more, we see that the plan of salvation, the plan of Yeshua, of His redemption, that Yeshua is in everything. And of course, it's not only about Yeshua, but about Yeshua and us, His congregation. And it binds totally together. And it's a wonderful love story. And we have the beginning in the first month. 1 is the number of 1. There is nothing else yet. 2 is the number of unity, and number is number 7. Now this month where the feast is in, and all the last feasts are in, that are shadows of things to come, that's the number of completion. And so also this feast completes many things in that plan of salvation. We know we have the last great day, standing for a marvelous time to come, and the judgment right before that. But this feast brings many, for the first fruits, it makes something complete. And I want to go into that aspect too. So I want to start just with a very basic thing. What are we commanded in that feast? And there we have Deuteronomy 16. I'll just read from it. You know all those scriptures. You don't always have to open them. I'm sure you know them very well. In Deuteronomy 16:14 it says, you shall rejoice in your feast. Like several times, when he said 3 times, I think it even says more often, we are to rejoice in the feast. You and your son, and your daughter, and your male slave, and your slave girl, and the Levite, and the alien, and the fatherless, and the widow that inside your gates. You shall keep a solemn feast 7 days to Yahweh your Elohim in the place which Yahweh shall choose, Jerusalem. And it says, you shall be altogether joyful. So we are called, we are commanded to rejoice. What a wonderful Elohim we have. But as you see also, it continues afterwards 3 times in a year. All male are commanded to come. And indeed, they come before in times back, they came in front of the altar, they brought the sacrifice in front of the altar. But the feast is to be celebrated by the whole family. It's a family feast, and we say it's a family reunion. And I'll go into this a little deeper, because it says here, to a father, bring your son, your daughter, and your whole household. And those that don't have the means to come here, you bring them with you. You're responsible to bring them all, because everybody's to rejoice in the blessing I've given you over the last half year with all these harvests. So in Leviticus 23, he continues, actually it's before that, and it says in verse 40, you shall take to yourself on the first day the fruit of majestic trees. We'll go into that in a little bit. And palm branches and boughs of oak trees and willows of the valley, and shall rejoice before Yahweh your Elohim 7 days. And you shall celebrate it a feast to Yahweh 7 days in a year, a never-ending statute throughout your generations. In the 7th month you shall keep it, right now. You shall sit in Sukkot for 7 days. So we are to dwell, we are to eat in Sukkot. So if you haven't done so, for this lunch or whenever, you still have it another 1-2 days, enjoy it. And there's much in that sukkah we can learn from. Because all the symbolism, the fruit, the sukkah, we know they stand for something bigger than just a little hut and a little fruit. And there's much to learn for that. So we are called to rejoice, but with rejoicing, there's thankfulness, because Yahweh, at the end of the harvest, He has blessed us with all these things. He gave us hands to work, but like we learned, without rain, without His blessing, something we cannot do. We could work as much as we wanted and nothing would be there. So it's a time of thankfulness. And in Deuteronomy 8:10, there it says, you shall eat and be satisfied, and you shall bless Yahweh. In Joel 2, in the end time, when he says he brings all the grain, the oil, and blesses you, it says in Joel 2:26, and you shall eat fully and be satisfied, and you shall praise the name of Yahweh your Elohim. So we know, and we'll see many scriptures that show this is a time of worship. And we know that tonight we'll have, because of that, especially a day where we worship Yahweh, we come to His holy city, to His holy place, and we worship before Him. And like Don said, it's not a time where we, in our society, in the culture where we came out of, even in Christianity, often worship is worshiping, like Nobu told me, and he phrased it good, people are worshiping the music. And that's not what we're here for. We're not worshiping the dance. We are worshiping Yahweh, and the music and the dance is nothing for us to look on, although Yahweh blesses also us with it. But everything is towards Him. And whether we can sing or not, whether we are good in dancing or not, Yahweh doesn't listen. Like it says, Yeshua, He didn't judge by the sight of His eyes. The same way Yahweh doesn't judge by His hearing. He judges the heart, and He hears our heart singing. And so you can praise and you can sing with the most beautiful voice, but in your heart you can still not worship. So tonight we want to worship from our heart, because it says Yahweh seeks those who worship in spirit and truth. So this is what we want to do tonight. And this is also what Sukkot is so much about. But of course, we also worship Yahweh, and we bless and we thank Him by bringing up the tithe. We're not only commanded to, but we want to. We want to give back of what He blessed us with. And this is the time of bringing the tithe to Jerusalem. We have the concept of the first fruits. Once everything that opens the womb, an animal, you take it and you can bring it up to Jerusalem. The tithe, which is of all the harvest, it accumulates over the year. And now is the end of the harvest. And now you have the fullness of your tithe. You know how much the tithe really is, the 10% of everything. And so now would be the time when people in ancient times brought up the tithe to Jerusalem. And we found it wonderful, and still doing it today that very same way. And it says, of course, He blesses you in everything you put your hand to, and you shall rejoice at this feast in everything you put your hand to. So, of course, the tithe is not only increase of the grain, of the wine, and most of us even don't farm anymore. It is of everything He blessed us to, where we put our hands to, and He brings the increase. So, but now I want to go a little bit into hidden treasures of this feast that come from the culture. And we know when David set up the Levitical order, as far as the singing and the musician at the tabernacle and later in the sanctuary in the temple, it was inspired by Yahweh. He got a pattern for everything, like Moses got it for the tabernacle in the wilderness. So it's not too far off to understand that what the Jews later did in the tabernacle, that it would all point to Yeshua, who was the goal of the law. And everything is pointing towards Him. So today is the 7th day of the feast, right? This day is called the Great Hoshana, Hoshana Rabbah, which means the Great Salvation. And it's very similar to the Great Yeshua, because everything of that custom that they had points towards Him, and Yeshua builds up on it. It is that every day they walked, they took willow branches, they took palm branches, and the priest would walk once around the altar, and they would call from Psalm 118, which we know is everything about Yeshua, the cornerstone, and it calls Yeshua by name all the time. They don't see that, but they're still doing it, and back then they did it. And today they pray the same prayer. They sing the psalm. And they sing, and they call, once they walked around once, Ana Yahweh Hoshiana, Ana Yahweh Hatzlichana. And it means, Yahweh, bring us salvation, Yahweh calls us to prosper now. And they closed the whole ceremony with calling, Kol Mevaser, Kol Mevaser. They want the Messiah to come soon. So they're calling for Yeshua, they're reading the psalm that calls His name all the time. And the 7th day today, they do that 7th time. They walk around the altar and do the very same thing. And remember with Jericho, they walked around once every day. On the 7th day, 7 times. It didn't mean that the faults crash when you walk around it 7 times. 7 times means everything that they encircle, like we said, Barega, going in circles, is dedicated to Yahweh. Like Jericho was the first city that was fully dedicated and the spoil totally dedicated to Yahweh. So also this sacrifice that is all about Yeshua, and we see, even in their symbolism, was dedicated to Yahweh. We have another custom, which is the water ceremony. Roni told about it, and we're down there, the pool of Shalom, where they got in a golden vessel, got the water, brought it up every day, all the first 7 days of the feast, and they would pour it out with the shout of the shofar, would pour it over the sacrifice, together with the oil, with the wine, which is brought at every sacrifice throughout the year. But during Sukkot, they add the water. And over the sacrifice that is consumed, they pour the wine and they pour out the water. The very same thing, we know the wine and blood, it stands for the same thing. And we know Yeshua's sacrifice, when he was pierced, the blood and the water came out. So everything they do points towards him. And we know at the last day, Yeshua even says, everyone who thirsts, come to me. And rivers of living waters will spring up from his belly, will come out from him. The same thing that he told to the Samaritan woman on the well. So, I'm sure many people heard that started to believe when they saw the whole thing. And Yeshua came from the... we'll go into that. Because probably he came through the Watergate when something else happened. Because now, this was at Sukkot. And Yeshua is just standing there in the plaza in front of the sanctuary saying that. The people hear it and they know this water ceremony went on for 12 hours every day. There was a joyful celebration all day, this water that Yahweh provides life. And now Yeshua says, this life comes through the Holy Spirit, through everyone who believes in me. And now the next feast, the next Passover, he comes from the Mount of Olives, comes over to Jerusalem, reminds us on something that will happen in the end time. He comes through, and now all the people, they start taking palm branches, they take all these things and they call out, Hoshiana in the highest. And they proclaim him the King of Israel. Something that is actually more to Sukkot, you would think. But the truth, the beautiful truth, is that Yeshua came first as the humble king, like it says, riding on a donkey, with all the symbolism of Sukkot. But he comes at Passover in the first month, and he starts this plan of salvation, the first sacrifice that was needed, for the seventh to be completed, like we read in Zechariah 14, in the end time, when everybody will come to worship Yeshua. And it's very interesting, the first thing Yeshua did when he came up into the sanctuary, they praise him as the King of Israel, the Messiah. He goes into the sanctuary and he cleans it from all traitors. He says it has become a cave of bandits, and he cleans it. It says in Zechariah 14, the very same thing. When he returns, in that day there will be no traitor anymore in the house of Yahweh, because it will be a house for all the nations to come for prayer. So, he purified us. And the seventh month is the completing of that. This part of the plan of salvation is complete, because we know that we will be changed when the millennium comes, which Sukkot is so much about. We will be a new creation. We will be complete and we will be one with Yahweh. I want to go into this now. The symbolism that Yahweh put into the fruit and everything we have on the roof. Where did I write it? Here. We have seen the fruits up there, right? They're beautiful. And don't we often say, we don't know why Yahweh chose us to be here. But for some reason he did. He handpicked each one of you to be here and to represent him. Like we handpicked those fruit to be representing all fruits he blessed us with, but something beautiful to bring to appear before Yahweh and to rejoice in it. And I think the beautiful story of Sukkot unfolds once we understand. And I just read this one verse and you will know what I'm pointing towards. In John 12:24, Yeshua says, "Truly, truly, I say to you that a grain of wheat, except it should fall and die on the ground, remains by itself. But if it dies, it produces much fruit." So in the first month, he laid this foundation, this seed. And we know that over generations and generations of faithful followers of Yeshua, more fruit was born. Until this day, where the fruit that Yeshua handpicked brings it before the Father and presents it before him. And echoing through time, you can hear how he says, "None of them whom you have given me," from John 17, "have I lost, except one, the son of perdition." So Yeshua, like we are rejoicing in that fruit he has blessed us with in our yearly cycle, in our little mind. But if we zoom out and see the bigger picture, Yeshua handpicked each one of you to present him this Sukkot in Jerusalem before the Father as the fruit he has borne by the blessing of the Father. And I just find it so beautiful because it calls us all the time, rejoice, rejoice, rejoice in the blessing. But I just want to go through a few scriptures showing how much Yahweh rejoices over you being here. And most of these scriptures I'm reading, it's only a handful I picked, are directly connected to Sukkot. And others are more general over the whole millennium. But I just find it amazing. In Deuteronomy 39, so the whole feast is about fruit and the blessing. "And Yahweh your Elohim will make you abundant in every work of your hand, and in the fruit of your body, and in the fruit of your livestock, and in the fruit of your ground for good, For Yahweh will again rejoice over you for good, as he rejoiced over your fathers. In Zephaniah 3:17, and this is an awesome scripture, it talks about this end time. Or it's in 16. In that day it shall be said to Jerusalem, fear not, Zion, do not let your hands droop. Yahweh your Elohim is mighty in your midst. He will save, Yeshua. He will rejoice over you with joy. He is silent in his love. He rejoices over you with a joyful shout, like the blowing of the shofar. Yahweh rejoices so much to see the fruit that Yeshua bore. He rejoices so much to see every one of us being here before him, to worship him in spirit and truth. And as we are fruit, it is so important that we bear fruit. Without fruit, there wouldn't be another sukkot. If this body would stop producing fruit, who would be in the kingdom? We know in the last generation it will be bad. But Yahweh has a master plan. He raises everybody from the dead to be in that last sukkot in the millennium, to be with him, all the fruit being together. But we have a responsibility. This being a fruit, and Joseph just brought me this one, which is a beautiful one, and represents sukkot in so many things. If I would open that, beside that I would be splashing with juice, you would see, I don't know how many hundreds of seed being in there. And that's how we have to be. Usually we have a beautiful crown in here representing the kingship. We see it on the robe of the high priest representing Yeshua. We see it on robes of kings. We see it on the 2 pillars of the sanctuary. This is all about kingship and priesthood and about the millennium where Messiah will combine both. And it's full of seeds. So we have to bear fruit. And we can go back to our countries, and the system of Babylon is everywhere. And isn't the new thing that fruit stop bearing fruit? You can't just take a seed and put it in the ground. How do you call that? Yeah. So they're modified. Those fruits that we buy, many of them don't bear fruit anymore. That's not how we want to be. We don't want to be of the system of Babylon. We want to be of the true vine and bear more fruit. The glory of Yahweh shall be forever. Yahweh will rejoice in his works. So that's wonderful. And I want to come to the last point now. That the sukkah that we see up there, we say it wilts and it gets old, right? But what we see is not the part which we have to focus on. Inside that sukkah is life. People are celebrating and there's joy. And remember how Yeshua said from the belly will flow rivers of living waters because of the Spirit. The wonderful truth is, and I just want to start with the verse again, and you'll see again what I'm talking about. In Leviticus 23 that I read, it says, Yahweh brought them out of Egypt and let them dwell in sukkahs. It continues, or you can find another scripture connected to it in Exodus 29:46 that says he brought them out of Egypt that he may dwell in their midst. This word in their midst can mean in the middle of them, it means in the very center. It is used, the name, my name is in him, in his midst, so deeply connected. When Sarah was laughing in herself, this was the same word, in the midst. When Rebecca had the 2 children in her womb, in her belly, the same thing. It was called the same word, in her midst. So he wants to dwell right here, but also in our midst, as we know. And the same is with the sukkah. It wilts, that's alive, like Don said so many times, alive here. But the beautiful story is that the Spirit of Yahweh is living in us, in this body that will not last too long, but his Spirit will, and with him we will live forever. So with that comes a very beautiful part of the story that we always tell. That I think one of the major aspects, and we mentioned many times, is the family of Yahweh, a family reunion. Because with that Spirit he put in us, with that being the fruit that he presents, and in the end, at the end of the cycle, after 6,000 years in the 7th millennium, and the 1st month and the 7th month, now it's the end of the harvest. In the end there will be the complete harvest. Everything will be together. Those in the ground, those in the sea, they will all be raised, all the first fruits, and they will be changed. They will have the Spirit of Yahweh in them. And isn't it a beautiful analogy where, where a husband or a bridegroom and a bride, they become one in flesh. And we see Yeshua and his bride becoming one in spirit. They will be one, like in John 17, where it says, make them one as we are one. And it says in Zechariah 14, which is all about Sukkot, in that day Yahweh will be Echad, and his name will be Echad. The family of Yahweh will complete, they will be together. So that's the beautiful part of it, and we're rehearsing it. We're coming from all nations, being handpicked to represent that. The family of Yahweh coming together. And at that time, very soon, in a place here, that will be fulfilled and will be complete. So, do you not know that you are sanctuary of Elohim and the Spirit of Yahweh dwells in you? Through faith, Messiah dwells in your heart, having been rooted and founded in love. At this time we'll see everything come together. And we want to bear fruit, so we'll be called worthy to appear before Him again. And not alone, but with many, many more. So, there's so many things. We have the kingdom coming. We have that King, our older brother, reigning here. And everybody worshiping Him. So it's a time of worship. It's a time of peace and completion of the master plan of Yahweh. But remember, like when he said, there's still the ingathering. And at that time, there are many people who are taught by the first fruits of Yahweh. And there will be many gathered during that time more. So it's an awesome blessing to be here, to be called children of the living Elohim. And I praise Yahweh for that.